The air in the room feels different tonight, doesn't it? Perhaps you can feel the faint, lingering tension in your shoulders, a subtle echo of all the hours you spent today, making sure you were seen in just the right light. You have likely spent the entire day moving between different rooms and different versions of yourself, carefully adjusting your tone, your expressions, and your words to match what others expected of you. By now, the performance has become so seamless that you might have forgotten where the actor ends and the person begins. That lingering ache in your chest is not a sign of failure. It is simply the fatigue of a heart that has been holding a mask in place for far too long. The floorboards beneath your feet have grown cold, and the shadows in the corner of the room have stretched into long, quiet shapes. Let yourself sink a little deeper into the warmth of your covers and try to notice the simple act of letting your weight settle. You do not need to do anything with your body right now. You do not need to sit tall or present a composed face or offer anyone a smile. The stage lights have been dimmed. The audience has gone home and you are finally behind the curtain. Here, in this private dark space, there is no one watching. You are allowed to take the costume off. You might feel as though you have to keep your mind occupied, as if letting go of the script would lead to a sudden, terrifying emptiness. But please know that you are not broken, and you are not responsible for holding the world together with the force of your own willpower. What you are feeling is a natural response to the constant pressure of being under a spotlight. Tonight, we will not try to fix your life or repair the parts of yourself that you think are frayed. We will explore the possibility that the exhaustion you feel is not caused by your lack of effort, but by the sheer volume of effort you have been exerting to stay in character. There is a strange and beautiful paradox in this. The very thing you fear, that loss of control, and the silence that follows, is actually the only place where true healing can begin. We are taught that to be a person of worth, we must constantly cultivate and defend a specific image of ourselves. We think that if we stop playing our role, we will cease to exist or fall apart. But the truth is much softer and much more liberating. The Buddha pointed toward a freedom that exists beneath the personality, beneath the names and the stories we carry, and beneath the masks we change throughout the day. Peace is not found by making the performance perfect. It is found by stepping out of the theatre entirely. Maybe you have felt this quiet panic before, when you are lying in bed and the mind begins to review the day, like a director critiquing an actor. It highlights the moments where you hesitated, or where you spoke too softly, or where you didn't quite hit the mark. It insists that if you only reflect long enough, if you only worry enough, you will eventually find a way to perform better tomorrow. But this is the archivist of the theatre, a tireless, unkind spirit that wants to preserve every mistake. It believes that memory is a blueprint for perfection. It doesn't understand that the more you grasp at the past, the more you tighten the grip that keeps you awake. The mind does not become calm because you have finally convinced yourself that you did everything right today. The mind becomes calm when you stop treating every internal critique as a command. You do not have to obey the voice that tells you to keep rehearsing. You do not have to follow the impulse to fix, change, or justify your own existence to the ceiling or the walls. What would happen if you simply let the curtains stay closed? What would happen if you allowed yourself to be just a presence in the room, without a single line of dialogue to deliver? You are safe enough to soften. The world will not unravel if you stop playing the part for a few hours, the people you worry about, the obligations that seem to require your constant vigilance, they are all resting now too. You have no more cues to hit. Tonight, you have no more scenes to prepare for. You can let the heavy, painted cloak of your persona slide from your shoulders, letting it fall onto the floor where it belongs. It is just fabric, after all. It is just a shape you took on to move through the day. Beneath it, there is a pulse that is steady, a rhythm that is ancient, and a quietness that requires no audience at all. As you lie here, listen to the way your breath moves through the silence of the room. It does not try to be perfect. It does not check to see if it is doing a good job. It simply rises and falls. A natural movement that knows exactly what to do without being told. This is the truth of your own nature. It is not a performance, and it is not a production. It is a quiet, living mystery that is already whole, even when the mask is discarded and the theatre is dark. You have spent so much energy trying to sustain a reflection that you forgot to look at the light source itself. Tonight, we are going to look toward that source. We are going to find a way to be in the world without being owned by the roles we inhabit. This is not a task that needs to be completed or a puzzle that needs to be solved before you fall asleep. It is a slow, steady return to the person you are when the doors are locked and the lights are out. When you feel that urge to pick up the script again, to start the mental rehearsal for tomorrow, just notice it. Do not fight it. Do not judge it. Just acknowledge that the urge is there, like a lingering memory of the day, and let it pass through you like a cool breeze through an open window. Everything you have done today, every effort to be understood, every attempt to be kind, every moment of uncertainty, it has brought you to this exact point of rest. You do not need to prove anything further. The day is behind you, an finished scene that has already been struck from the stage. There is no need to analyze the lighting or the timing of your exits. The script has been returned to the shelf, and you are no longer the one who has to maintain the illusion of control. Feel the space behind your eyes, the quiet, receptive expanse where awareness dwells. This is where you truly live. This is the seat of the silent observer, the one who watches the actor but is never consumed by the role. When you center yourself here, the panic of the performer loses its sting. The roles become what they were always meant to be, tools for communication and connection, rather than the bars of a cage. You can walk through your life, play your parts with grace, and still know that you are not defined by the success of the scene. In a moment, we will look at a story about this exact struggle, about someone who spent their life building puppets and forgot that they were the light that made them dance. But for now, just breathe. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Notice the weight of your limbs on the mattress. Allow your senses to ground you, pulling you away from the mental theatre of the day and into the actual, tangible reality of this moment. You are not a character in a book, and you are not a figure on a stage. You are the space in which all of this happens. And that space is wide, and it is peaceful, and it is entirely yours to inhabit tonight. There is a profound, quiet beauty in being able to put down the heavy, complex weight of who you think you are. You have been carrying this image like a shield, but tonight, the shield is not needed. You can let it rest against the wall. You can allow your features to go slack, your brow to smooth, and your hands to unfold. Everything you have been trying to resolve tonight is safe to leave in the hands of the morning. There is no urgency here, no deadline for your healing, and no score being kept of your progress. You have arrived. And that, in itself, is the only place you ever really needed to be. In a high valley where the clouds often gather. To rest, there lived a man who spent his entire life in the service of a grand theatre. He was not an actor, and he was not a playwright. He was the one who curated the masks. The theatre was famous for its collection, hundreds of faces carved from willow wood and painted with intense, lifelike expressions. There were masks for sorrow, masks for sudden rage, masks for ecstatic joy, and masks for quiet, contemplative longing. Each morning, the man would climb the creaking ladder to the high shelves, gently dusting each face and checking the thin silk cords that kept them secure. He took great pride in his work. He believed that if a single mask was misplaced, or if its paint began to fade, the theatre itself would lose its soul. Whenever a performer arrived to prepare for a play, the man would study them with a critical, narrowed eye. He would search through the rows of willow faces until he found the one that perfectly matched the character they needed to portray. He would hand it over with a solemn bow, feeling a deep sense of responsibility. He felt that he was the guardian of the theatre's truth, the one who ensured that every emotion was presented with absolute precision. His life was a sequence of rehearsals. He practiced how to hold his own body to appear industrious, how to keep his voice steady when speaking to the performers, and how to maintain an expression of focused calm even when he was internally anxious. He had become so skilled at his role that he rarely knew what he felt without checking to see if he was projecting it correctly. He was a man composed of curated gestures. When he stood in the quiet of the empty hall, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, he often felt a strange, hollow coldness. He would reach up to touch his own face, suddenly terrified that he might have forgotten what it felt like when there was no mask in front of it. One autumn evening, when the mist had wrapped itself around the theatre like a heavy grey blanket, a traveller knocked on the heavy wooden doors. The man opened the door to find an old woman standing there. She wore a simple, travel-worn robe, and her face was weathered by the sun and the wind. She did not ask for a performance. She asked only if she could sit by the fire in the main hall for the night. The man, ever the performer of his own duty, bowed low and invited her in. He hurried to light a fire in the hearth, making sure his movements were graceful and efficient, as if he were being watched by an invisible audience. The woman sat by the flames. Watching him, she did not speak. She simply watched him move, from the rows of masks to the fire, then to the shelves, then back to the fire. He felt the weight of her gaze. He began to exaggerate his movements, trying to show her how dedicated he was, how important his work was. He took down a particularly beautiful mask, one carved to express deep, meditative peace, and began to polish it with a piece of soft velvet. He looked at the woman, waiting for her to praise his skill. She did not praise him. She simply pointed to the mask in his hands and asked, in a voice as dry as autumn leaves, "Why are you holding that so tightly?" The man was surprised. He looked down at his hands. His knuckles were white, and his fingers were cramped from the force of his grip. He had been holding the wooden face as if it might shatter if he let it go. He quickly loosened his grip, feeling a flush of embarrassment. He told her that it was a precious item and that it required constant vigilance to keep it from harm. The woman laughed, a sound that seemed to echo through the dusty rafters of the theatre. She asked him to bring her a bowl of water and a piece of charcoal from the fire. The man, curious and slightly unsettled, obeyed her request. He set the bowl on the floor between them. She took the charcoal and dipped it into the water, then began to draw a simple circle on the wooden floorboards. She looked at him and said, "If you keep your hand in a fist, you can never feel the temperature of the water. If you keep your grip on your life as tight as you hold that wooden face, you will never know if you are holding something precious or something that has already turned to dust." She then stood up and walked to the wall where the man kept his own personal mask. It was a mask he had carved for himself years ago, intended to show the world that he was a man of steady, unshakable purpose. It was the only thing he had ever truly made for himself. He watched, paralyzed, as the old woman reached out and took the mask from its hook. She held it up to the firelight, examining the paint and the fine lines of the wood. The man wanted to stop her, to tell her to be careful, but he found he could not move. She turned to him and asked, "Is this the face you choose, or is this the face you are hiding behind?" Before he could answer, she walked to the heavy, iron-bound trunk that sat in the corner of the room. She opened it and dropped his mask inside. She looked at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through the theatre, through the masks, and into the very center of his chest. She said that she would be sleeping in the hall tonight, and that when the sun rose, he would need to find a way to meet the morning without reaching for that shelf. The man did not sleep that night. He sat by the dying fire, looking at the trunk in the corner. For the first time in his life, he was not performing. He was not checking his posture. He was not trying to impress the woman or the empty theatre. He felt a terrifying, raw exposure. He was just a man sitting in the dark, with no mask to offer him the comfort of a defined role. The silence of the theatre was no longer a stage for his work. It was just a space. He looked at his hands again. They were trembling. He realized that for all the years he had spent protecting the faces on the walls, he had never once allowed himself to simply be still. He had turned his life into a series of auditions, hoping that if he played his role well enough, he would eventually be granted the peace of knowing he was enough. But sitting there in the quiet, he felt the first faint stirrings of something else. It was not peace, not yet. It was something more like the beginning of an honest breath. He watched the embers in the fire grow dim. He noticed that the world didn't fall apart because he wasn't performing. The roof didn't collapse. The shadows didn't swallow the room. The silence simply held him. He felt the coolness of the night air on his face, a sensation he had ignored for decades because he was too busy checking if his expression was appropriate. For the temperature, he touched his own skin, and for the first time, he didn't try to label the feeling or judge it. He just felt it. He realized that the woman hadn't taken his mask to hurt him. She had taken it to reveal the empty space where he had been trying to hide. He thought of all the years he had spent standing on the ladder, dusting and rearranging, convinced that he was the most important person in the theatre. He realized he was just a man with a very small, very fragile collection of willow wood and a heart that was tired of pretending to be made of something harder. As the first grey light of dawn began to touch the window panes, he understood that he didn't need the shelf and he didn't need the ladder. He stood up, his legs stiff from the night, and walked to the fire. He took the bowl of water and the charcoal. He looked at the circle the woman had drawn. He realized that he could spend the rest of his life drawing circles, or he could simply step out of the circle entirely and see what the morning looked like from the outside. He didn't go to the shelf. He didn't look at the rows of masks. He went to the door and opened it, letting the damp, cool air of the morning wash over him. He felt the dampness settle on his clothes and his skin. He breathed in the scent of the wet grass and the pine trees. He was an actor who had finally finished his last scene, but instead of leaving the theatre, he realized he had finally stepped out of the character he had been playing for so long. He looked back at the empty hall one last time. He saw the masks staring down from their shelves, their painted expressions frozen in wood. They looked so small now, so static, and so entirely disconnected from the living outside. He understood that he had been living in a museum of emotions, while the actual life he was meant to be experiencing was happening somewhere else, somewhere entirely unscripted. He began to walk toward the valley, leaving the door of the theatre ajar. He didn't know where he was going, and he didn't know who he would be when he got there. He only knew that for the first time in his life, he didn't need to check. He didn't need to adjust. He didn't need to ask if he was doing it right. He was simply moving. And the earth was beneath his feet, and the sky was above his head, and that was enough. But the lesson of the theatre was deep, and he still had much to learn about the way the mind tries to rebuild the stage, even when we think we have walked away. The man's journey into the valley was not a sudden arrival into bliss. It was a slow, sometimes difficult walk through the layers of his own habits. And it is in these layers, dear friend, that we begin to see how the theatre of our own minds is constructed, and how we might finally find the quiet strength to leave the stage behind. The story of the man and the theatre is not telling us to abandon the roles we play in our daily lives. It is not asking us to strip away our identities until there is nothing left but a cold, empty stage. That would be another form of performance, a new costume designed to look like holiness or detachment. The wisdom here is much softer, and it speaks directly to that tightness you have felt in your chest when you are trying to be someone, or trying to be enough, or trying to defend the version of yourself you have carefully constructed for others to see. Think about the way the man held the wooden mask. He was not protecting it because he loved the wood. He was protecting it because he believed that without that specific face, he would be invisible, or he would be judged, or he would simply cease to be the person he had convinced himself he needed to be. He turned the object into a necessity for his existence. This is what we often do with our own stories. We hold on to a certain image of who we are, the competent one, the one who never makes mistakes, the one who is always patient, and we grip it so tightly that our knuckles turn white. We fear that if we let the mask slide away, even for a moment, the world will see the raw, unpolished, imperfect human underneath. But the pain we feel is rarely just about the situation itself. When you face a difficult day, or a misunderstanding with someone you love, or a failure at work, that is the first level of experience. It is the simple, honest reality of things not going as you hoped. Life has a way of being messy, unpredictable, and sometimes quite sharp. That is the nature of living in a world that is always moving and changing. However, we almost always add a second layer of struggle. We look at the first event, the mistake, the coldness, the disappointment, and we begin to build a theatre around it. We start to direct the play of our own inner narrative. We tell ourselves that we should have known better, that we must never let this happen again, that we are failing in some fundamental way. We treat our own vulnerability as a performance error. We treat our own human uncertainty as if it were a sign that we have forgotten our lines. This is the second wound. It is the wound we inflict upon ourselves by refusing to accept the reality of the first wound. The Buddhist insight here is not about becoming unfeeling. It is about recognizing the difference between the actual event and the frantic performance of the mind that follows it. You do not need to perform your way out of your own humanity. You do not need to constantly re-edit the script of your past or frantically rehearse the script of your future to ensure you are playing the right part. The tightness you feel is the sound of the stage machinery grinding, of the mind trying to maintain a set of props that were never intended to be your permanent reality. When you find yourself lying in bed at night, reviewing the scenes of the day, notice how much of that effort is directed toward maintaining the mask. Notice how much energy you spend trying to justify your actions, or trying to explain away your mistakes, or trying to prove to an invisible audience that you were right, or smart, or kind, or capable. This effort is exhausting because it is fundamentally dishonest. It is an attempt to create a static, perfect version of a self that is, in truth, fluid and always in motion. We are all a little bit like the man in the theatre, convinced that if we just find the right mask, everything will make sense. But the mask is always made of wood or clay. It can be held, it can be polished, it can be displayed, but it cannot breathe. The life that you are living right now, the breath that fills your lungs, the warmth of the air against your skin, the way your heart beats, without you needing to tell it how, that is the only thing that is truly real. That is the light that makes the puppets dance. It is the light that exists whether the puppets are moving or not. You have been carrying a tremendous load, trying to ensure that every scene you inhabit is perfectly lit and perfectly performed. But you are allowed to walk off the stage. You are allowed to leave the theatre without needing to tell anyone where you are going. This is not about failing to live up to your responsibilities. It is about realizing that you can meet your life with a soft hand instead of a fist. You can show up for your work, your family, and your commitments with a presence that is not tied to the preservation of a specific image. Imagine for a moment that you could simply set the mask down, not forever, and not in a way that creates a mess for everyone else, but just for this hour, just for the time it takes to rest. What would it feel like to stop worrying about how your personality is being perceived? What would it feel like to stop checking the reflection of your actions in the eyes of others? The silence that follows is not a void. It is a space of immense, quiet relief. The man in the story was terrified because he thought the empty trunk was a sign that he had lost everything. He didn't yet understand that the trunk was the very thing he needed to open in order to find his freedom. He thought he was losing his purpose, but he was actually just losing his tether. He was being invited to move from the theatre of the mind, which is always judging and comparing and replaying, into the actual world of the senses. We often fear that if we stop judging our own performances, we will stop growing, or we will stop caring, or we will become someone we do not recognize. But the opposite is true. When you stop fighting the reality of your own human experience, when you stop calling your sadness a failure or your confusion a mistake, you actually become more present. You become capable of seeing the world as it is, rather than as you need it to be to feel safe. This is what it means to be awake to the present. It means noticing when the mind has begun to build the stage again. It means seeing the old habit of rehearsal for what it is, a protective reflex, a way of trying to manage the unknown, and then choosing, with great gentleness, to unhook the costume. You do not need to hate the part of you that wants to perform. That part of you is just a frightened child, hoping that if it plays the role perfectly, it will finally be safe. You can be kind to that part. You can see its fear and offer it a quiet, steady assurance. You do not need to be a finished master of your own soul before you are allowed to be at peace. You do not need to have solved all the problems of your identity before you can close your eyes and sleep. The work is not in being perfect. The work is in the return. It is in the moment you notice yourself reaching for the mask, and instead of putting it on, you take a deep, slow breath and simply watch it rest. The mind will try to pull you back into the play. It will try to convince you that the performance is mandatory, that the audience is waiting, and that your lines are essential. This is not a battle to be fought. It is a habit to be seen. You can let the thoughts come and go, like actors walking across the stage, while you sit in the dark of the wings and breathe. You do not have to join them. You do not have to follow them into their lines. You can remain the witness, the one who sits in the quiet and knows that the play is not the whole of your life. There is such profound strength in this capacity to remain when the drama starts. It is not an act of willpower. It is an act of letting go of the need for the drama to be different. It is an act of radical acceptance. When you stop resisting the way things are, the energy that you were using to maintain the resistance becomes available to you again. It turns into clarity. It turns into a deeper sense of home. And it turns into the ability to rest, even in the middle of a world that is always trying to turn everything into a scene. You have been running a long marathon in the costume of your own expectations. It is no wonder you are tired. It is no wonder you feel like the room is too small and the night is too heavy. But the night is just the night. It is the space that remains when the lights have been turned off. It is the time for the theatre to be empty, for the dust to settle, and for the wood of the masks to be silent. You are welcome here. You are invited to be exactly as you are, with no role to fulfill and no audience to satisfy. Take a moment now to feel the weight of your own body against the surface beneath you. Do not try to hold your muscles in a certain way to look relaxed. Just let them go. Let your hands be heavy. Let your feet be still. Let the skin of your face soften, letting go of the phantom expressions you practiced all day. You are not on stage now. You are in the private, holy space of your own life. And in this space, there is nothing that needs to be fixed. There is nothing that needs to be proven. There is only the simple, steady, rhythmic rising and falling of your own breath, carrying you back to the center of your own quiet heart. If it feels right, allow your eyelids to grow heavy and invite your entire body to settle into the support beneath you. You have been carrying the weight of your own expectations all day, much like an actor walking in a costume that has grown far too heavy for the stage. Now, there is nothing left to portray. You can let the muscles in your jaw loosen, feeling the space between your teeth. You can let your shoulders drop away from your ears, as if you are finally removing a cape you no longer need to wear. Your breath does not require your permission or your guidance to find its rhythm. It knows how to rise, and it knows how to fall, moving with the ease of the tide against a quiet shore. Try to bring your awareness to the space in your mind, where the thoughts are currently performing their familiar routines. Perhaps you hear the voice of the director, the one that critiques your timing or reminds you of your mistakes. Do not try to silence it, and do not try to debate with it. Just notice it. Acknowledge that the mind is doing what it has been trained to do, which is to stay busy, to stay vigilant, and to stay in character. If you can, imagine that you are sitting in the dark of the theatre, while these thoughts play out on the stage in front of you. You are not the character on the stage. You are the one who is watching. Pick one specific thought that has been tethering you to the day. Maybe it is a conversation that feels unresolved, or a worry about tomorrow that keeps pulling you back into rehearsal. Take that thought, and with a gentle mental motion, imagine lifting it from the screen of your awareness. It is just a flicker of light, a temporary image. Place it into an imaginary wooden trunk, the kind that might hold a discarded mask. You are not throwing the thought away, and you are not pretending it does not exist. You are simply giving it a place to rest for a few hours, so that you do not have to hold it in your own hands. As you look at that trunk, notice how much energy you are using just to keep the lid open, just to stare at the contents. Now you can close the lid. You can step away from the center of the stage. Feel the relief of taking one step toward the wings, toward the quiet, dark corners where the performance does not reach. You might notice a sensation of lightness as you realize that nothing in that trunk requires your active supervision. Tonight, the problems you have placed inside are not escaping. They are simply waiting. And they are capable of waiting without your constant, anxious attention. If you find that your mind is trying to sneak back onto the stage, trying to peek into the trunk, or rewrite the lines of the scenes, simply notice that too. This is not a failure. It is just the habit of the theatre. You can greet this impulse with kindness, almost as if you are smiling at a child who is afraid of the dark. You do not need to scold yourself for being human. You do not need to be a perfect practitioner of silence. Even noticing the urge to rehearse is an act of awakening. It is the moment when the actor realizes they are not the character, but the one who can step out of the spotlight. Take a slow, deep breath, with a soft exhale. With each breath, feel yourself sinking deeper into the stillness. There is a vast, cool space within you that is untouched by the roles you play. It is a space that does not care if you were successful today, or if you felt scattered and uncertain. It does not care about the approval of the audience or the critiques of the director. This space is entirely your own. It is the backstage of your existence, where you are allowed to simply be without having to perform, explain, or prove anything at all. You might feel a slight resistance, a small, internal tug that asks if this is safe. It asks if you should really be letting go of the lines, if you should really be abandoning the mask. This is a very common feeling. It is the fear that, if you are not performing, you will lose your place in the world. But look at the room around you. The world is continuing. The night is doing its work. You are not the one holding the stars in the sky or turning the earth on its axis. You can afford to take a break from the work of being you. You can afford to be nothing, just for a while. If a memory arises, let it arrive, let it be seen, and then let it fade into the dark. Do not try to paint it or polish it. Do not try to make it fit into a play. Treat it like a shadow passing over the floor, a shape that has no substance and no claim on your future. You are the space that holds the shadow, but you are not the shadow itself. You are the witness, the silent observer of your own unfolding life. And in this witness space, there is room for everything, and there is pressure to do nothing. Notice how your body feels now. The tension you were holding has begun to dissolve, like salt in a warm basin of water. You are not forcing this relaxation. You are simply allowing the natural state of rest to return. Your body knows how to sleep. It knows how to recover. It has been waiting for the moment when you would finally allow the stage to go quiet. You are doing a wonderful job simply by showing up and choosing to let go, even for these brief, precious moments. Whenever you feel that urge to reach for the mask again, just place a hand on your heart and feel the steady, rhythmic pulse beneath your skin. This is the only line you have to memorize. It is the only beat you have to follow. Everything else is just scenery. And scenery is meant to be changed. And it is meant to be left behind. Tonight, you are stripping the set. You are clearing the stage. You are returning to the truth of your own, unadorned presence. Take another slow breath, feeling the cool air travel into your lungs, and let it warm as it leaves you. You are becoming a part of the night itself. You are as still as the mountain, as flowing as the stream, and as vast as the sky that hangs above the valley. There is no performance here. There is only being. There is only the quiet, rhythmic pulse of the night. And you are resting at the very heart of it. Everything you have worried about, everything you have tried to manage, everything you have struggled to portray, it is all being held in the soft, dark palm of the night. You do not have to carry it. You do not have to justify it. You can just rest. Even if your thoughts are still circling, even if the mind feels like it wants to return to the performance, you are succeeding. Because the success is not in having a blank mind. The success is in realizing that the mind is a theater, and that you are the one who is currently stepping out of the spotlight. You are the space that allows the theater to exist, and that space is wide and calm and profoundly, endlessly patient. Stay in this space as long as you like. There is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing else you need to do. The night is long, and it is here to hold you completely and without condition. Years later, when the man who had left the theatre was living in a small stone hut on the edge of a mountain village, he found himself haunted by a new kind of performance. He had walked away from the grand halls and the rows of wooden faces, but his mind had brought the stage along with it. He spent his days gathering firewood and tending a small garden. Yet even here, he could not stop directing his own actions. If he accidentally dropped a piece of firewood, his mind would immediately begin to criticize his clumsiness, framing it as a scene from a failure. If a villager walked past without greeting him, he would spend the entire afternoon rewriting the interaction in his head, trying to figure out what role he had failed to play correctly. He had traded the theatre of puppets for the theatre of the self. He was still the director, the actor, and the harshest critic of his own life. He had become a master of his own internal drama, always looking for a flaw to fix or a gesture to improve. One afternoon, he sought out an old mountain painter who lived in a cave further up the slope. This painter was known for his ability to capture the movement of the clouds without ever sketching the mountain itself. The man found him sitting on a flat stone, staring at a waterfall that tumbled down the cliffs. Beside him was a heavy, blackened iron brush pot filled with water and a single, large brush that looked as if it had seen 1,000 storms. The man bowed and explained his exhaustion. He told the painter how he had left the theatre, how he had abandoned his collection of masks, and how he had hoped to find a life that was finally, truly real. He spoke of his frustration, his inability to stop critiquing his own movements, and the way his mind turned every mundane task into a performance that had to be justified. He asked the painter if he could teach him how to paint his own life, how to make his daily actions as effortless and as honest as the water falling down the rocks. The painter did not look at him for a long time. He simply dipped his large brush into the iron pot and began to paint invisible strokes on the surface of the wet stone. He painted a bird in flight, then a tree swaying in the wind, then a person walking through the rain. Each stroke was bold, yet as soon as the water touched the heated stone, it hissed and evaporated into the air. Nothing remained. The man watched, feeling a familiar tension rising in his chest. He wanted to see a finished picture. He wanted the painter to create something that would last, something he could point to and say, "This is the right way to live. This is how I should look." He felt his mind beginning to judge the painter, thinking that the man was wasting his time, that he was not teaching him anything useful. The painter finally looked at him and gestured to the brush pot. He told the man that he had been trying to paint a portrait of his own identity for his entire life, but he was using the wrong canvas. He said that he was trying to carve his life into stone, expecting it to remain there forever, fixed and perfect, so that others would see it and approve. He handed the brush to the man and told him to try. The man took the brush, his hand trembling slightly. He tried to paint a circle, a simple, perfect, unshakable circle. But as he drew, his mind began to interfere. He worried that the circle was not round enough. He worried that the painter would think he was a poor student. He worried that the water was drying too fast. His strokes became jagged and hesitant. He stopped, frustrated, and looked at the painter. He told him that he could not do it, that his mind was too loud, that he could not get it right. The painter smiled and took the brush back. He dipped it into the water and then grabbed a handful of dry, dusty earth. From the ground, he mixed the earth into the water until it became a thick, dark, muddy paste. He painted a streak of this thick mud across the stone. He told the man that this was his life. It was not a masterpiece. It was just mud and water. It did not have to look. It did not have to represent a specific version of a human being. It just had to be. And then, eventually, it would dry and be blown away by the wind. The man looked at the mud on the stone. He felt a sudden, sharp pang of loss. He realized he had been trying to paint a masterpiece of himself, a version that would be remembered, a version that would be safe from criticism. The painter then asked him a simple question. If the wind comes tonight and blows the mud away, will the stone have failed? The man hesitated. He looked at the stone. Solid and ancient. He realized that the stone did not care about the mud. The stone did not have a performance to maintain. It did not need the mud to justify its existence. The man took a breath. It was a long first time in many years. He did not try to make it sound like the breath of a calm, enlightened monk. He just let it be a tired human breath. He reached out and touched the mud on the stone. He smeared it with his palm, destroying the shape the painter had made. He did not do it with anger, and he did not do it with shame. He did it because he realized that the shape didn't matter. He had spent so long trying to hold on to his identity, trying to protect his reputation, trying to be sure that everyone saw him as a man of purpose, that he had become a prisoner of his own efforts. He looked at his stained hand. He looked at the stone. He saw that he could either spend his remaining years trying to paint the perfect picture of himself, or he could be the stone that allowed the mud to come and go. He chose the stone. He didn't become a master of wisdom in that moment. He didn't suddenly understand everything about the universe. He simply stood up and walked back toward his hut. As he walked, his mind started to comment. It told him that he had looked foolish, that he had smeared the mud like a child, that the painter must be laughing at him. Before, he would have started an argument with that voice, he would have tried to explain to himself why he did what he did. He would have started the performance of the rational, calm man. But this time, he stopped. He noticed the voice. He felt the familiar desire to defend himself. And then, he did something different. He took a breath, and instead of engaging with the thought, he looked at the sky. He watched a cloud drift across the mountain peak. He allowed the thought to be there, but he did not follow it. He did not give it a stage. He simply continued to walk, feeling the gravel crunch beneath his sandals. That night, when he lay down on his sleeping mat, the mind tried to initiate the theatre again. It brought up the scene with the painter, replaying the moment of the mud-smeared hand, analyzing every detail for signs of failure. But the man did not follow the script. He didn't try to stop the thoughts, and he didn't try to change the memory. He just lay there, listening to the wind outside his hut, and acknowledged that the mind was doing its work. It was trying to protect him by rehearsing, by reviewing, by trying to control the narrative of his own past. He felt a profound, quiet compassion for that mind. It was so exhausted, so driven by fear. He didn't need to fix it. He didn't need to force it into silence. He could just let it be. He was the stone, and the thoughts were just the mud. They would come, they would linger, and then, when the wind changed, they would fade. He was finally able to rest, because he had stopped believing that the performance was mandatory. He had stopped believing that he was the painting. He was the one who was watching the painting fade. And in that watching, there was a peace that the theatre could never have provided. He fell into a sleep that was not a performance of rest, but a genuine, heavy, and honest surrender. And in his sleep, he was not the man who was learning to be wise. He was not the actor who had left the stage. He was simply a presence, a small, quiet part of a vast, unscripted world that was breathing in and out all by itself. The lesson of the mud and the stone was not something he had mastered. It was something he was still learning, something he would continue to learn with every breath he took as long as he was alive. But for tonight, the rehearsal was over. The theatre was closed, and the stone was finally at peace, resting beneath the wide, uncaring, and beautiful sky. The exhaustion you feel is not a failure of your character. It is the natural result of living in a world that asks you to be a sculpture of stone, while your heart remains a living, changing tide. We often confuse safety with the ability to control how we are seen. We think that if we can just manage the impression we leave on others, if we can just curate the right response to every challenge, we will finally be immune to the sting of life. This is the theatre of the ego. It is a tireless, expensive, and ultimately hollow enterprise. It asks you to invest every drop of your energy into maintaining a shape that was never meant to be permanent. Consider the energy it takes to hold a heavy wooden mask in front of your face for 16 hours a day. It is not just the physical strain on your arms. It is the constant, underlying anxiety that the mask might slip. It is the internal narrative that tells you if people see your true face, they will turn away. So you rehearse. You play the part of the capable one, the one who is never tired, the one who always knows what to say. You refine your performance with every passing hour, looking for better ways to hide the fatigue, the fear, and the raw human uncertainty that actually defines you. The Buddhist perspective on this struggle is remarkably compassionate. It suggests that there are two distinct kinds of weight you are currently carrying. The first is the weight of reality itself. Things happen. People are sometimes cold. Mistakes occur. Plans fall apart. This is the simple, honest friction of being a human being in a world of other human beings. It is the first wound. It is inevitable. It is the mountain trail that is occasionally steep, the weather that is occasionally harsh, and the life that is occasionally messy. But then, there is the second weight. This is the extra burden you add by refusing to let reality be what it is. It is the internal performance that starts the moment the first wound occurs. It is the voice that says, "I should not have let this happen," or "I must make sure no one sees how much this hurt," or "I need to perform my way out of this discomfort." This is the second wound. It is the wound of resistance. It is the wound of trying to argue with the truth of your own experience. The mind believes that if it judges the experience harshly enough, it can prevent it from happening again. But this judgment does not protect you. It only keeps the old pain alive, feeding it, polishing it, and giving it a home in your thoughts. When you replay a conversation from 3 years ago and feel the same shame you felt in that moment, you are not learning from the past. You are performing the past. You are taking an old wound and turning it into a script, and then you are acting it out again for an audience that no longer exists. This is how the ego tries to control the uncontrollable. It believes that by keeping the memory alive and by judging it, it is somehow holding onto the steering wheel of your life. It is the illusion of a captain who believes that by shouting at the waves, he can command the direction of the sea. You do not need to be the captain who shouts at the waves. You can be the water itself. When you stop fighting the reality of your current state, you are not giving up. You are finally waking up. You are realizing that you are not the performance of your life, but the spacious awareness in which the performance unfolds. That space is not bothered by the rain, and it is not moved by the storm. It is simply there, holding everything, observing everything, and needing nothing in return. This shift in relationship is where the true medicine lies. You do not need to remove the difficulty from your life. You do not need to make your mind a blank slate of silence. You only need to change how you relate to the noise. When a thought of judgment arises, instead of treating it as a command, treat it as a passing cloud. Watch it. Feel the weight of the emotion. But notice that the emotion is not the whole of who you are. The emotion is a shape in the sky, a temporary arrangement of mud and water, and it has no permanent claim on your soul. You have spent so long trying to fix yourself, trying to smooth out the edges of your personality, and trying to hide the parts of you that seem messy or uncomposed. This is a form of self-hatred that masks itself as self-improvement. It assumes that you are a project to be completed, rather than a mystery to be lived. But you are not a project. You are not a mask that needs constant repainting. The fear of uncertainty is perhaps the deepest root of this performance. We are terrified that if we stop playing our roles, the world will forget us, or, worse, reject us. We believe that our value is tied to our utility, our charm, or our ability to maintain a certain image. But look at the natural world. A tree does not perform to be a tree. It does not rehearse its growth or ask the forest if its leaves are the correct shape. It simply grows in response to the sun and the rain. It trusts the process of its own life, even when the winter is long and the branches are bare. You are a part of that same ancient process. You do not need to justify your existence. Your existence is already justified by the very fact that you are here, breathing and experiencing this moment. When you feel that familiar pull of anxiety, that urge to check, to fix, or to rehearse, try to name the pattern without labeling yourself as the problem. Say to yourself, this is the voice of the habit, or this is the theater of the mind, or this is the feeling of fear. Looking for a script, by naming it, you create a tiny essential distance. You are no longer the fear. You are the one who recognizes the fear. And in that recognition, the grip of the emotion begins to loosen. It loses its power to command you. It becomes a feeling, not a fact. You are not being asked to be a saint or to achieve a state of perfect, unmoving stillness. You are simply being asked to be more honest with yourself. When you are tired, let yourself be tired, without adding the judgment that you should be energetic. When you are sad, let yourself be sad, without adding the judgment that you should be happy. The extra suffering always comes from the word should. It is the word that creates the performance. It is the word that forces you back onto the stage when your heart is crying out for the wings. This is the path of radical, gentle self-acceptance. It is the practice of coming back to the center of your own life over and over again. Whenever the mind tries to pull you into the theater, it is the commitment to look at your own suffering with the eyes of a friend, not a director. If you find yourself holding a mask, you don't need to be ashamed. Just notice it, gently, with the tenderness you would offer a child. Put the mask down. Let it rest. It has been a heavy, loyal servant, but it is not who you are. You have been living in a world of echoes, believing that the echo is the voice, but the voice is you. The voice is the quiet, steady pulse of your own reality, which is always present, even when the theater is dark. You have already done enough. You have already played enough roles to last a lifetime. Tonight, you are allowed to stop. You are allowed to be someone who does not have to be anything at all. The silence that follows is not a loss. It is a homecoming, and you are, at last, arriving where you have always been, in the space between the thoughts, in the depth of the breath, and in the quiet, unscripted beauty of your own living heart. This practice does not belong in the high mountains or the quiet halls of a temple. It belongs in the middle of your Tuesday afternoon. It belongs to the moments when you are standing in a crowded room, or staring at a glowing screen, or lying in the dark waiting for sleep to arrive. You can bring the stillness of the stone into the noise of your life. When you find yourself checking your phone for a message that has not arrived, realize that you are waiting for a cue to start the scene. You are checking to see if your performance has been validated, if you have been seen in the way you hoped. Instead of following that impulse, take a single, slow breath. Notice the urge. Feel the tightness of the expectation in your chest, and let it pass. You do not need the message to be whole. You are already standing in the light of your own presence. Think of the times when you feel as though you are falling behind, as if everyone else has a script that you were never given. This is the mind trying to turn your life into a race. It is the ego comparing your backstage, where you know all your fears and struggles, to everyone else's stage, where they only show you the highlights. You do not have to compete. You do not have to perform your progress for anyone else's benefit. When that feeling of inadequacy pricks at your skin, acknowledge that it is just a cloud passing over the mountain. It is not a permanent feature of your landscape. You can look at the sky and see the cloud without needing to become the cloud. When you replay a mistake from the day, replaying the words until they lose their meaning, stop and ask yourself, who is the director of this theater? You are, and you have the power to close the curtain. You do not need to solve the error tonight. You do not need to fix the past by ruminating on it. The past is like the mud the painter smeared on the stone. It has already dried. It has already been scattered by the wind. To keep holding it in your hands is only to stain yourself with dust that has no power over your future. Choose to put the brush down. Choose to let the stone be clean. There will be moments when you feel the heavy mantle of expectation, the pressure to always be the person who holds everything together. You might feel guilty for wanting to rest, as if your value is tied to your productivity, or as if you are letting someone down by finally becoming still. This is the most dangerous role of all. You are not a machine designed to run until it breaks. You are a living, breathing being that requires the winter as much as the spring. Allowing yourself to rest is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of clarity. It is the moment you reclaim your life from the demands of the performance, even in the most difficult conversations, where you feel the urge to defend your position or to hide your vulnerability. You can pause. You can take a breath before you speak. That single, simple pause is the gateway to freedom. It is the moment you step out of the character and into the person. You do not have to have the perfect answer. You do not have to be the wise, composed, or impenetrable version of yourself that you think others require. You can be honest. You can be uncertain. You can be human, and that is enough. You may find yourself smiling while feeling a hollow ache in your chest, pretending that everything is fine, because you think it is your duty to keep the peace. You believe that if you reveal your shadow, the world will see you as damaged, but the world does not want your mask. The world wants your truth. When you allow yourself to be seen in your imperfection, you give others the permission to do the same. You are not a burden. You are a human being, and your presence is a gift that does not need to be wrapped in the finery of a perfect performance. If you find yourself lying in bed, thoughts racing like a film, projected on the ceiling, do not treat the thoughts as commands. They are just events. They are the noise of the theatre, the creak of the rafters, the rustle of the audience. They are not the play. You are the space where the thoughts appear. When you begin to worry about tomorrow, bring your attention back to the physical weight of your limbs on the bed. Feel the texture of your sheet. Feel the temperature of the air as it touches your skin. Ground yourself in the actual, physical reality of the room. You are not in the future. You are here, and here is where your life actually happens. Every time you notice the mind starting the show, you are succeeding. It does not matter how many times you drift back into the rehearsal. It only matters that you notice it. You can be gentle with yourself. You can say, "There is the theatre again," and then gently turn your attention back to the breath, back to the stone, back to the silence of the night. This is the practice. It is not about reaching a state of permanent perfection. It is about returning over and over again to the simplicity of the current moment. You can care for your loved ones, your work, and your commitments without holding them in a fist. Imagine holding a bird in your hands. If you hold it too tightly, you crush the life out of it. If you open your hands, the bird is free to fly, but it may also choose to stay. This is how you can live your life. You can hold your intentions, your goals, and your relationships with an open hand. You can love without the need for control. You can work without the need for an outcome. You can live without the need for a mask. You do not have to earn your right to exist. You do not have to prove that you are worthy of rest. You are a part of the vast, shifting, beautiful mystery of the world. You are the stone that allows the wind to blow. You are the valley that receives the rain. You are the quiet, steady observer of the passing scenes. Everything you have been trying to manage, everything you have been trying to perform, is safe to leave in the hands of the coming morning. You have done the work of being a person for today. Now, you can allow yourself to simply be. As you move through your days, look for these moments of return. Acknowledge them when they happen. A breath, a pause, a choice to let go. These are the small, sacred acts of an awakened life. They do not require a stage. They do not require an audience. They only require you to be present to the life that is already here, breathing and waiting and unfolding, regardless of whether you are playing your part perfectly or not. You are not the character. You are the light, and the light is always enough. The theatre is dim now. The heavy velvet curtains of your mind have been drawn across the stage. There is no audience waiting for a final bow, and there is no script that requires your immediate attention. You are not the character who was expected to perform today, and you are certainly not the mask that was worn to satisfy the eyes of others. All of that has been set aside. The props are stored away in the dark, and the painted faces are silent on their high shelves. You are simply a person breathing in the quiet of the night, and that is a profound and complete thing to be. Feel the floor beneath you, solid and unmoving. It is like the floor of the empty theatre, which does not care how many footsteps have walked across it, or how many plays have been staged in its shadow. It remains, waiting for nothing, holding you in this deep, cool stillness. Let your feet be heavy. Let the energy that was once used to walk across the stage simply dissolve into the wood or the stone beneath you. You do not need to stand. You do not need to move. You are allowed to be entirely still. The air in the room is thin and cool, like the air that gathers in the corners of an empty hall when the candles have all been extinguished. It settles against your skin, a soft touch that asks for nothing. Breathe into that coolness. Let it fill the spaces where you were once tense, where you once held your breath to prepare for the next scene. Your lungs know this rhythm. Your chest knows how to rise and fall without the guidance of a director. You are being breathed by the night, a process that is as natural and as ancient as the slow turning of the seasons. Think of the mud that was smeared on the stone. It was only an idea, a temporary mark on a permanent surface. Now, as you prepare to descend into the deeper quiet, see that mark fading away. The wind of your own slow, steady breath is clearing the stone. What was once a concern is now just a shadow, and what was once a demand is now just a memory of a sound. You are the stone. You are the stillness that outlasts the performance. There is no need to worry about what tomorrow will require, for tomorrow is another stage, another play, and you do not need to carry tonite scenery into the morning light. Your hands are open, resting at your sides, or folded over your chest. They are empty, and in that emptiness there is such great freedom. You are not holding the wooden face of your duties. You are not clutching the heavy weight of your regrets. You have let them fall to the floor of the wings, and they will stay there, waiting for the dark to claim them. You are lighter than you have been in a long time. Your pulse, that steady, rhythmic clock that beats without your permission, is slowing down. It is the sound of the theatre finally closing its doors for the night. If a stray thought wanders into the darkness of your mind, let it be. Do not chase it, and do not try to put it back on the stage. It is merely a ghost of the performance, a flicker of light in an empty hall. Watch it pass like a moth, brushing against a curtain, and then watch the darkness close in around it. There is nothing for you to fix. There is no version of yourself that needs to be perfected before you are allowed to sleep. The person you are right now, in the middle of this quiet night, is exactly the person who deserves to rest. The silence is not a void. It is a presence. It is the same silence that exists in the heart of the mountains and in the deep, unmoving waters of the valley. It is a space where nothing is demanded of you, where you are not expected to be clever, or kind, or capable, or strong. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be vulnerable. You are allowed to let the performance fall away entirely until there is nothing left but the rhythm of your own heart. That rhythm is enough. It is the music that plays when the show is over, a slow, steady song of returning home. Imagine the dark of the theatre, so vast and so comforting. The corners are hidden in shadow. The dust that danced in the spotlight is now resting on the floorboards. Everything has returned to its proper place, back into the stillness from which it came. You are resting in that same peace. You are not a player anymore. You are the observer who has finally sat down in the darkness, who has finally decided that the play was never meant to be the whole of your existence. You are the awareness, the one who watches the light dim and the curtain fall, the one who knows that the stage is not the world. There is a strange, beautiful relief in realizing that you do not have to be anything at all. The world will keep turning. The stars will keep moving in their patterns, and the morning will come in its own time. You do not need to watch over it. You do not need to prepare for it. You can let go of the entire structure of your day, piece by piece, until you are floating in the quiet dark, unburdened and unscripted. You are safe here. You are completely and entirely held by the night. As the breath slows even further, let the edges of your body soften. Let the boundary between you and the room become porous, as if you are simply a part of the stillness that fills the space. There is no theatre, there is no performance, and there is no mask. There is only the breath, and the cooling air, and the deep, dark, and endless peace of simply being alive. You are not running anymore. You are not striving anymore. You are resting in the heart of your own quiet, where the performance cannot find you, and where the morning is still a long, long way away. If the dawn were to never come, would you be content to stay in this stillness forever?